Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and you're watching another episode of Overbooked, the series where I talk about every single book on my shelf because it's the only way I can fulfill my destiny. Today I am talking about a fantasy book that many have heard of and many have read. It is Neil Gaiman's Stardust. First up, some quick disclaimers. I think this book was purchased by my mother. I've owned various copies of it in the past. Regardless of where books are coming from, nobody's paying me to talk about books, and all opinions are my own. I am going to keep this as spoiler-free as humanly possible. If you haven't already read Stardust, where do I stand on it? I don't think anything's going to ruin this book for you, but if you do want to go in knowing absolutely nothing, pause this video, go away, read the book, come back when you've read it. It's not very long, and we'll chat about it then. Stardust first published in 1996, and I would argue it's one of the better known Neil Gaiman books, mostly because of the very much well-loved, especially by me, 2007 film adaptation. I'll come on to the film versus the book stuff in a bit. I normally do an author bio at this point. Do I need to talk about Neil Gaiman? I talked about him last week, English author, written a whole bunch of stuff. We're all good. If you didn't watch last week's video and you can't be bothered, suffice to say I have a mixed relationship with Neil Gaiman's writing. Sometimes I really love it, sometimes it's very much not for me, for a number of reasons which we might get into in this video. Basic plot of this book, we have a town wall, which has a wall, through which one can get to another realm. Not another realm in a, another kingdom, but another world. Our young protagonist Tristan goes over the wall to find a star for his fiancée Victoria, or his desired fiancée Victoria, finds the star, turns out she's an actual person. Romance, plot, witches. This is a very short book. If I talk too much more about it, I will spoil something for you. You can kind of guess where it's going. I really like the core elements of the story. I think that the idea of going to get a fallen star and it turns out she's a person is always going to be entertaining to me. I like kind of these coming of age, young small town boys discovering what they really want, destiny. It's all good stuff. It really harkens back to a lot of the old don't think about it too hard fiction I used to read, which is one of my favourite things to read, is that kind of thing where you're like, how would it work if you had no political training when you'd suddenly been made the princess? You don't think about it too hard. You just enjoy the wish fulfillment of maybe one day I will become a princess too. Don't want that anymore, but did at the time. There's a lot of other plot elements going on, and basically, in theory, everyone in this story has an interesting backstory, an interesting goal. They all want different things and it all ties together in a very entertaining way, which I think Neil Gaiman does typically do quite well. He'll sow seeds and then reap them later. It's a good bit of craft, I guess. The writing, if you enjoy very fairy tale-esque writing, if that's something you look for in a book, this book has it. It's very clearly the inspiration. It works within the context of the story because a lot of the characters are very drawing from archetypes of things. So you have the kind of the farm boy. He's not a farm boy, he's a shop boy, but you know, that character. You have the witches who are very, very witchy. And all I can picture in my head is the film. We're going to come on to this. If you enjoy fairy tale writing, if you enjoy books that are trying to be fairy tales in that sense of slightly archaic, very much you are aware that you are reading a book, you are aware that you are reading a story's being told to you, this might be a book that you enjoy. Converse to some other stories of that kind. We have a main character, Tristan, who actually does think about things and changes his opinion, and it's not just a, well, I realised that you were dying and suddenly I realised all of these things. It genuinely does feel like he's presented with another worldview and kind of goes, oh, hang on a minute, I need to reevaluate, and we get to see that on the page. And I appreciate that, especially from a male protagonist in a fairy tale, which, you know, they haven't always had the most nuanced take, you know. It's appreciated, shall we say. I've written in my cons, useless at writing women. So evidently I was a bit cross when I originally wrote this. I talked about this a bit last week. I don't think Neil Gaiman often, in the books that I have read, in the experiences I have had, you can have your own opinions, please do not hate me for this. I don't think he writes women particularly well. I think that's particularly evident in aspects of this book. I think that there are some female characters who are very good, but for the most part, I think because I know the film so well, and I'm pretty sure I did see the film before I read the book. In the film, we get much more out of these female characters. They have a lot more agency, they have a lot more of their own wants, desires, needs, interests. They don't just exist in Tristan's perspective of them. And for one part, I mentioned this last week, we are seeing this world through his perspective. It's not first person, but it is very much geared to Tristan's story. And I can kind of see how in that You might argue there are some, like, we can't get into her backstory because this isn't a very long book and this is Tristan's book, but also they're much more interesting than his. Do I want to hear about what's going on in the mind of a fallen star who's falling in love? Yes. Yes, I do. Do I want to hear more about Tristan's thoughts on his fiancée? I'm okay. It's the thing of once I noticed it was a thing that annoyed me about Neil Gaiman's writing in some other things that I'd read or I was reading when I was rereading all of these books for this series. I couldn't stop noticing it, and that probably inflated it in my head even more. It bothers me about the book, and it's a shame because a lot of the other stuff about this is really, really good. It's also a bit short, and that might be something you're really looking for. I can't remember how many pages this is. 194. Short books might be something you're looking for. They might be, but I do think it means that we don't get to dig down into some elements of the story that I think personally found much more interesting. I think if this book were the length of Neverwhere and we got to look into the world and add in some more elements, which I think maybe happens in the film, there are some more things going on, I think it would just be a better time. But arguably being left wanting more is sometimes something I use as a pro, so take that as you will. The film is better. If you feel otherwise, you are completely entitled to your opinion. 9.5 times out of 10, that is not the case for most book film adaptations. But in this case, I love the film so much. It has so much nostalgia for me. And I think that the characters are better. There is more interest. There is more world in this because it has the chance to flesh things out and you can fill in a lot of the background details that a book this short just doesn't have. It works better, the character's better, Tristan's more interesting. And I don't know how much that's because it's pulled slightly away from that fairy tale writing where it is very much about this one character and his story and the idea of stories and fairy tale and legend, blah, blah, blah. And because it's just like, we're going to tell a fun adventure story, here we go. I think it works better. I do. It's much more actiony as well. And I can't remember who wrote the Stardust screenplay. Let's see. Matthew Vaughn and Jane Goldman. There you go. Well, they did a good job. In my opinion, anyway. That's sort of where I sit on the film. If I have the choice of rereading the book or watching the film again, I will watch the film again. It will, you know, take me a little bit longer, but be a much more enjoyable experience. And I might listen to the soundtrack later today because I'm kind of excited about it. Some comparisons. I was having a ponder about similar fairy tale-esque books, and around about the time that I read this, I also read Thorn, which I think is a very, very good book. It's a really nice fairy tale retelling, but it's a female character who has loads of agency and it's really interesting. Yes, go and read Thorn. One of my favourite sort of original fairy tales is The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. Talked about this a lot. There's already a review up for this series on my channel. It's so good. If you like that fairy tale storytelling kind of vibe, this is what I would recommend. But if you did want another original fairy tale from Neil Gaiman that I do enjoy, that will be a video next week, I suspect. This is The Sleeper and the Spindle. This is a gorgeous illustrated let's find a picture, that's not a spoiler. Illustrated book that is like a Sleeping Beauty, loose Sleeping Beauty retelling. Gorgeous, gorgeous. Excited to talk about that next week and try and take some nice B-roll of the pictures so that I'm not just like anxiously holding up to the screen. We'll see. In my closing thoughts for my notes I've written, if you did want to read this, it wouldn't take long, but it would take maybe as much time as it would take to obtain the film, make some popcorn and watch it, and that would, in my opinion, be a more fun evening. There we go. I do think this is a good book. I think it's a great story. I'm glad for what it has inspired. And if you enjoyed the film and you thought, gosh, I wish that was just a little bit more dark, this would be an option for you, I guess. And I kind of like that in the idea of old fairy tales then getting very like Disney-ified versions where they take out all of the darker moments and the potentially more adult moments, and the original has all of that in it. I like that as a parallel. This is a little bit darker and potentially more grown up, shall we say. Have you read this? Have you seen the film? Is the film one of your favourites? Should we have a film night where we watch the film? Answer all of these questions below. If you've got any other good fairy tale or fairy tale-esque stories that you would like to recommend, plonk those down in the comments. While you're down there commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. You can also follow me on all of my social media. Come chat on my Discord. We have a lovely time. If you adore this book with all of your heart and you wish to defend it, that is the place to do it. I think that's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. Might not be the next one. It will work out. It's gonna be some bloopers now. In fact, we have the comparisons from last week's Neil Gaiman videos still on the shelf. There we go. Some quick disclaimers before we start. It genuinely does feel like he's presented with another worldview. The washing machine is done. I know. Are we done? So if you're looking for something much shorter, this might be a great option for you. I'm gonna go turn that off.